so that's my passion, is being able to really coach people to break into tech sales and to crush it in tech sales. I just saw I was getting more satisfaction and fulfillment from that coaching side of it. Like, I still do really enjoy the role. I actually just, on our company meeting like an hour ago, I was demoing Hyperbound on how to cold call on Hyperbound with our company. And so I enjoy that part of it, and doing the prospecting and interacting with clients. But I loved coaching and teaching someone else to do it and helping them get their first win, and then just seeing them help earn money that could like change their life when they're like moving into that next role. One of the things that I always talk about is, if you have never done the job before, it doesn't matter. You can literally practice being an SDR right now. Go find companies, go find hiring managers and recruiting teams and SDRs, call them, email them, reach out to them, talk to them, and then qualify if this is the right fit.
And it's funny, cold calling, while probably the most difficult to run and the most expensive to run, is what's working the best. And that's what we're seeing on our end.
Do you want to do what no one else is doing? Because if a hiring manager gets 1,000 resumes, how are you going to stand out? You're going to do the things that the 0.01% are doing, which is like send a video, and instead of clicking easy apply. And a lot of times they'll be through a cold call because email is crowded, like LinkedIn automation is crowded. And so unless you're doing videos and landing in someone's inbox or getting connections, cold calling is, every single team I talk to right now, it's like the #1 channel that they're sourcing meetings. So I'm a big proponent of remote work because I can spend more time with my family. I was able to move to wherever I wanted. I do love remote work. But for an SDR role, if you're new, I tell every single new rep, I recommend starting in person, learning the ropes first, and learning that discipline on how to be able to be a good business operator. And then you can go remote for the right company that's going to support you remotely.
Welcome to Prospecting Pros. And on today's show, we have Troy Johnson. Welcome.
Yeah, thanks for having me, John.
Troy and I, this is the first time we've actually talked, but I've seen him on LinkedIn quite a bit, and I noticed we're commenting and liking a lot of the same stuff. And when I checked out his profile, I thought he'd be a great fit to have on and talk about SDRs and appointment setting and lead generation. So what I'd like to do to start off is to talk about you and your background and really how you got to where you are today. So if you could walk the audience through just how you got your your career started. You have several BDR manager roles on your resume. So walk us through some of those and where you're working today.
Yeah, quick high level. I'm Troy Johnson. I'm based right outside of Tampa, Florida, in Plant City, and my current role is an SDR enablement program manager at a company called 𝐿. And so my past experience, actually, I've dropped out of college twice, so I'm a 2-time college dropout, but I ended up kind of falling into leasing apartments. That was like my first job, and like my kind of first job into sales, customer service. I grew up in West Virginia and actually moved to the DC area to like get a job out there. And I just noticed that after doing that job for a few years, there was a ceiling you hit. Like there's only like a cap you can really make within that sales role. And so I was really looking for roles where I could increase that ceiling, and if I was doing harder work and I was executing at a higher performance, that I would be able to earn more. And I heard a lot of people talking about tech sales and like, oh, you should go into tech sales if you want to try to earn more and things like that. And in about 2017, I think summer of 2017, I got my first BDR role at a company called LUD&x. I was thrown onto a auto dialer and connect and sell, and I was ripping dials for about the first year, and was able to do well in the role. They eventually moved me to a team lead role, and eventually I took over the global team and was managing a team in the US, in Dublin, and in London as well. And that's kind of like what got me started on my journey to a BDR manager. And then I did that for about 6 years at a couple different companies, at a company called Electric Product School in Harvard, and I helped build out their SDR teams from both inbound and outbound functions, and did enjoy SDR management. Like I get excited about helping people learn the role and then ultimately be able to like find that career role where they can have really high earning potential. And so that's my passion, is being able to really coach people to break into tech sales and to crush it in tech sales. And that's kind of what brought me to 𝐿&x. Is in my current role, all I do is coach full time. And so we kind of talked about this before we jumped on. With SDR enablement, it's more of that skills coach on a sports team versus the SDR manager would be more that head coach. And so what I do now today is heavily focus on teaching you the role, helping you be successful in the role, and then helping you prepare for the next role. So that's kind of how I got to where I am today in enablement.
I like that sports analogy, the skill coach versus the head coach, because you look at, let's say, a basketball team, you have the head coach, of course, but then you also have the shooting coach, right? So someone who will go and like actually help on form, or like Steph Curry has his own shooting coach. And so it's a great analogy. As a sports fan, I get it. So I want to go back to when you were a BDR. What was it like? I think if I saw correctly on your LinkedIn, that was roughly around 2018. What was it like being an SDR then versus now? How are things changed versus when you were in the role and to now where you're kind of coaching SDRs?
It's kind of funny because I feel like we started one way, stuff changed, and we're back to where we are again, and it's just vastly more complicated. But back then, like what I first did when I first started, I was on Connect and Sell. I had a list of accounts. They were your like closed loss accounts, follow-ups, and cold leads. And you would dial them. And you knew your persona, what were the challenges, and your job was to just book meetings with those prospects. And eventually we actually we brought on outreach and started to do more like strategic outreach around that time. And we were doing what they called like account development roles, where you would kind of work strategically with larger accounts. And instead of like going at a larger volume, you're going after a smaller number of accounts and trying to break in through email and through LinkedIn and through phone. And so we really started that like multi-channel outreach from our company. And that kind of evolved a little bit more over time. But what I really enjoyed about that is it helped me really understand how to break into accounts outside of just calling. Like, what does a good email look like? How do you engage with people on LinkedIn? How do you do that like deep research on a company and come with a point of view to understand what's a good reason to reach out to a company, and not just because they're your ideal persona. And so that's kind of what it looked like. And I thought I was going to be going down the AE path or AM path. I actually interviewed for a few roles, but ultimately I was already doing a lot of the team lead and manager responsibilities. I just liked helping people learn the job and be successful in the job, and teaching new hires on how to do that. And so eventually I started to become a team lead, where you would start to take discovery calls and prospect, and you'd do some coaching. And then eventually when the manager left, they needed someone to fill the spot. And so I took over that role and then fully started to just coach the team on what we were able to do successfully as we transitioned from that like more like spray and pray, calling all these lists, to more of a multi-channel strategic outreach.
Yeah, that was actually going to be one of my questions, is how did you decide, at what point were you, okay, I'm going to go to the management route rather than continuing to down the selling route? Is there anything you said you enjoyed it more, anything else that either management saw in you or you liked more about that path?
I wasn't anticipating it. Like, it wasn't something when I got into the role, I'm like, oh, I want to be the manager and manage a team of BDRs. But it was something where the management team came to me and kind of tapped me on the shoulder and said, hey, we have a few team lead roles coming up. And so I was splitting that responsibility with somebody else. And I just saw I was getting more satisfaction and fulfillment from that coaching side of it. Like, I still do really enjoy the role. I actually just, on our company meeting like an hour ago, I was demoing Hyperbound on how to cold call on Hyperbound with our company. And so I enjoy that part of it and doing the prospecting and interacting with clients. But I loved coaching and teaching someone else to do it and helping them get their first win, and then just seeing them help earn money that could like change their life when they're like moving into that next role. And so I just saw this kind of career path that was really cool to be a part of it in people's life, and got a lot of fulfillment from that. And so that kind of helped shape my direction, where I just stayed on that path of helping people both break into tech sales, but also helping them get to the next role. Because as a BDR, you don't want to be a BDR forever. Most likely, you're usually there for a few years, and then you're trying to move towards that next level. And I get a lot of joy from helping people do that.
That's great. And what would you say to people that are an SDR now and they have a few different paths to go down, right? Like you talked about, you could go down a management role or route, or you could go down a seller route. What would you say to them? I guess two-part question. How would you can you identify why someone would be better in one role versus the other? And then the other part is, what do people miss, or because a lot of SDRs will say, "Hey, I want to become the manager," right? What do they miss in that role? Like, what are some of the things they overlook as to what they're jumping into?
Yeah. So what to know if you want to choose that path, either AE or manager, and then what are some good characteristics to look for in those two types of individuals? Yeah, I would say if you are a rep and you're trying to decide manager or AE, is there's a do you know who Ryan Holiday is? By the way, he wrote Obstacle is the Way, and he writes a lot of books on Stoicism and just kind of breaks down a lot of Stoic principles. But when his writing assistant, Billy Oppenheimer, he's got really good content. I'll share it with you afterwards. But one of the things he talks about in trying to find fulfillment in what you do in your work is looking for clues, and like looking for clues as you're doing work, like kind of follow the clues of the things that you get fulfillment in. What are the type of work you could do, and like it wouldn't be boring to you, but it would be boring to somebody else. And for me, like a lot of that, it showed me that I really enjoyed like standardizing what good looks like, documenting my process, and then teaching someone else on how to do that, versus maybe more that customer facing interactions. And if you are a rep and you're sitting there thinking, oh, I really enjoy interacting with my team and teaching others, like that should be a clue. Or if it's something you really enjoy interacting with prospects and that gives you energy at the end of the day, that should be a clue. And kind of just pursue that and see that where that takes you. And then what's great was like I've done BDR manager, I've done the BDR role, I've even done channel business development for a period of time where I took calls. I've done enablement. And I think you can always pivot easily within these roles, but I would just kind of follow the clues of what do you find enjoyment from, and also ask your manager and peers, like, what do you see as my strengths, and kind of get some outside perspective. And then what I look for is exactly that. Like I have team members every week, we do a call review, who jump in and give coaching to their peers every week. And it's consistent and it's honest, and they're not sugarcoating it. They're doing it because they want them to get better, and they're sharing best practices and pumping up their team. Like if you like that, you're going to be a good fit for the manager role. But if it's something where you want to go on your own and you want to kind of dig into it, and maybe you do some of that, but you really are focused on your own development and want to be able to go crush it as a seller, then I would go try the sales route first.
Yeah, I can agree with that. We have several SDRs on our team, and I can tell when someone's really caring about others and making sure others are following the process, or if there's a process that is updated and it's new, that they don't throw a fit. They're like, okay, yeah, let's adapt it like this, and I'll make sure the others are doing it as well. Versus someone that's just like very sales driven, money driven, which is just completely fine in the sales world. But you're better off going down the sales route, and you can sometimes pick up on these things when they're in that BDR role, is what might make more sense. I also tell some SDRs who want to go and become a manager, like, you have to understand the different set of responsibilities you're getting yourself into. You are now coach, but you're also part therapist. You are probably working more hours just because you're attending to more people. So like it's different than you might think, right? So sometimes continuing to go down towards the AE route might be a better path.
I think that's a great point, is like knowing what you're getting yourself into, because the SDR manager role is really fulfilling, but it's very hard. A lot of times your team is constantly turning over because they're either getting promoted, maybe they don't like the role, or for whatever reason they're not in the role after about a year to 18 months. versus like an AE role or others are usually in that role longer. You also have entry level people like who've never done this before, and you have sometimes like the reality of what's actually going on versus like the targets and the goals for the company aren't aligned, and so you have to figure that out. But to your point, a lot of it is you're kind of a therapist sometimes, and you got to be there on the personal side for other people and letting them vent. And so sometimes it feels like an island because you can't really go to your team and vent about what's going on. You have to make sure that you're leading by example. But I know you're a new parent as well. It's kind of like being a parent. Like you have to lead your family, you have to lead by example. And it's really tough, but it's really satisfying as well because seeing someone get their wins, be successful in their career, it's awesome.
This episode is sponsored by LevelUp Leads, a B2B sales development and appointment setting agency. Companies always need pipeline, but they oftentimes don't want to hire SDRs internally. The whole process is risky and expensive. You've got hiring costs, onboarding, training, additional spend on your tech stack, a few months to ramp up. And with that being said, SDRs are a high turnover position, and the person you hire might not necessarily work out, so you need to start all over again. That's why companies outsource this. LevelUp Leads allocates a team of people, their tech stack, so you can onboard and launch your campaigns in about a week. They set qualified meetings in your calendar so your team has more selling opportunities. Visit levelupleads.io today to learn more. All right, now back to the show.
You mentioned some of the SDRs maybe not staying in the role for various reasons, whether that's promotion or leaving or getting fired. How does it work when, for whatever reason, that SDR is no longer in that role? What's your process like of getting looking at new SDRs and deciding who you're going to bring on, and what's the process like to get them up to speed at your current company?
At my current company.
Yeah.
So if we have someone leave, let go, or promoted, our recruiting team starts to look for somebody. We typically will start to like share job postings, stuff like that, and share with our network and try to get people to bring them towards us of like who are some ideal candidates. When we're getting people into the funnel, typically what we're looking for is, why do you want this job, this specific job at JumpCloud, and then show us that you can do this job. And so with the SDR job for me, because I like consult and help SDRs outside of work to be able to help break into tech sales, one of the things that I always talk about is if you have never done the job before, it doesn't matter. You can literally practice being an SDR right now. Go find companies, go find hiring managers and recruiting teams and SDRs, call them, email them, reach out to them, talk to them, and then qualify if this is the right fit and set meetings and set interviews. And that's what I look for, is I want someone to be proactive and tell me why they want this specific job versus any other job, and then why they're the best fit for this job versus everybody else. And so that's what we look for. We'll do some like high level interviews, but we'll also do some tests as well to test on certain skill sets from top performers to make sure that they can take coaching, they can follow directions, they can handle feedback and things like that. And so that's typically the process of how we handle it today.
It's one of the rare roles where you can actually demonstrate the job in the interview process. And every company has an interview process, and they might want you to follow certain steps. But there's no better way than going out of like figuring out who to contact, getting their information, and calling them. Even though you can say, "Hey, look, I'm going to follow the process, but I just want to let you know I found you here," and explain exactly this is why I'm excited about this role. And it just shows that you can hunt, which most companies want.
I think that's so great, because if you think about it from the perspective of a manager, a hiring manager, I want to make sure that this person can do the job and can ramp quickly into the job, and they'll stay and be successful. So I don't want to take risks if I don't have to. I don't want to go off gut feeling. I want to have proof. And so you show your proof in your interview process. You should show evidence and not just hold on to your experience. And I see a lot of reps who've been SDRs just kind of go based off their experience and say, "Yeah, I've done this," but they're not showing it in the interview. And I see someone else who's hungry, who's going above and beyond, and they're showing me that they can do this job successfully, I'm going to go with that person because they are showing me they want to be at this company and that they can do this job. And I think the second part of this is if you've never done the job before, you'll find out really quickly if you don't like to be an SDR by finding companies, reaching out to companies, and cold calling them and emailing and going after them on LinkedIn, sending videos. If you don't like that, you'll realize that's not the job for me probably. I probably want to go do something else because that's the job for the next couple of years. You're going to prospect, you're going to call people, you're going to ask questions, and you're going to book meetings. And so it's a great like test for your own self too.
Yeah, whenever a SDR candidate will cold call me, I was like, okay, great. You found my number. You're comfortable cold calling. It's a great, because that's what our SDRs do is they cold call. They're not responsible for there's other ways to prospect, right? But really the majority of what they're doing is on the phones. How is it at 𝐬𝐿? Are they mainly on the phones, or how's the breakdown of their prospecting look?
The majority is the phone right now, is the majority where you break in from outbound prospecting. So that's heavily what we focus on, and we brought on Hyperbound. It really helps us ramp people up quickly. So in the past, they were like practicing like 10 to 20 times during onboarding with like manual practice, and now we can help them ramp up faster with AI roleplay. But it's heavily cold calling right now for our team.
That's great. Previously, you said it's funny how some of this goes in cycles. So you'll have, when you started back in 2018 or around that time frame, I post about this on LinkedIn a lot and talk about it on this podcast. Is I think some of this stuff goes and it's trendy, and then people start picking up on it, and then they start doing it, but then it becomes too crowded. So then people start slowly transitioning to the next thing. Or it's like PPC. It's like ultimately then those keywords become too expensive, and just like this cycle. And it's funny, cold calling, while probably the most difficult to run and the most expensive to run, is what's working the best. And that's what we're seeing on our end. And I think part of that is AI has made things a lot easier, sending emails, sending LinkedIn, doing research, but it's still the calling that AI can't do well, or it's illegal to cold call using AI. And that's what really breaks through the noise right now, right? How can you be human? Like, what are the channels where you can be human? And that's calling, conferences or events, and referrals, right? You're kind of getting that human connection there. There's not a whole lot of other options.
I think what you're describing right now too, I think that's has similar parallels to landing a job. You're following the same process. You want to do what no one else is doing. Because if a hiring manager gets 1,000 resumes, how are you going to stand out? You're going to do the things that the 0.01% are doing, which is like send a video, and instead of clicking easy apply. And so for outbound, it's the same mindset. To your point, if you're just emailing like a COO at a mid-sized company and you're not getting responses, you're probably going to have to call the team first, learn about the current state, what's going on, try to get referred in to someone around him or to that person. And a lot of times they'll be through a cold call because email is crowded, like LinkedIn automation is crowded. And so unless you're doing videos and landing in someone's inbox or getting connections, cold calling is every single team I talk to right now. It's like the number one channel that they're sourcing meetings.
It's the number one channel for us by a mile. But with that said, it's a beast. That's why you have these SDR managers, right? You have SDR enablement managers like yourself. And so if you don't have the luxury of getting all these people in place, it becomes very difficult, right? It's one thing to hire, but then you've got the tools, and then you've got someone that's got to manage them. And then what happens if they leave, or what happens if you let them go? You kind of have to start all over again. And a lot of people don't realize there's a lot of costs in just getting someone a butt in place, right? Just hiring someone. You've got the cost to advertise the role. Then you've got the cost, who's interviewing them. And so it's a headache. I know I'm kind of going off on a tangent here, but that's why it can work really well, but it's also difficult to do.
I think when companies do this, we were talking about this beforehand. I do think it makes sense to make sure you've done a test on a certain ICP or persona or segment before you start to like ramp up a lot of people into the role. I've been at companies in the past where they had never done any sort of outbound to a specific area, and they just threw like 6 reps at an area and just said like figure out outbound. I don't think that's the way to do it. Like you need to kind of like have a plan, validate something's working, and prove what good looks like. And so, but it is so true. The amount of time it takes to find somebody good, find somebody who'll be successful takes a lot of time. And so if they stay, great. They're probably going to get promoted within a year. So you got to be ready to backfill them because a lot of people will get promoted fast. And if they're not great, you have to decide quickly on if they can do the job or not, because if you wait too long and you're 3, 4, 6 months in the role, you just wasted like half a year on one person who's not generating any pipeline. And that's so much lost cost if you make a bad hire.
What do you, based on a lot of the different roles you've had managing SDRs, what has been the typical ramp time that you've seen to get an SDR up to speed and kind of take the training wheels off?
So I think it depends on the segment, because I've worked at companies that sold into SMB anywhere from like 15 employees to 75. I've worked at companies that we were selling into like enterprises like Nike and Disney. And I think it really depends on the goals in the segment. But for like SMB, if it's a very simple sale, I see people ramping up in 45 days to 2 months. If it's something that's more enterprise, mid-market, larger, like 3 to 4 months. And that's like on average what we're going for. But a lot of these larger orgs, what I've seen happen before is if you don't have a process of what good looks like, or you don't have the ability to like practice and ramp up quickly, in these enterprise orgs, sometimes it takes up to like 5 to 6 months. And so you could be waiting half a year, and then you only get like 2 quarters like full production from somebody if you don't take some time to help ramp them up right. And so that's why I'm really passionate about SDR enablement, and I'm really biased about this because it's my role. But I think if you take the time to invest in onboarding, especially for the SDR role, you will see a massive return on investment, because you'll take somebody, you'll quickly be able to decide if they're the right fit or not. And if they are, bringing them from like 6 months to 3 months makes a massive impact if you get a full quarter of producing versus someone who comes in, crushes it for 2 quarters, gets promoted, and you spent like 6 to 8 months hiring, onboarding them before they even were productive.
Yeah, that's what's tough. So because you're passionate about this, there's a lot of tools out now that can help with getting reps up to speed, right? You mentioned Hyperbound. There's a few other, even just in the interview process, there's a few other tools that you can use to better qualify reps or better get them up to speed outside of Hyperbound, which for those of you out there, it's essentially a tool that allows reps to practice their script, practice objection handling, and gives you feedback on that on your own time in your bedroom, or you don't necessarily need a manager there. We use a similar, like a smaller competitor, but for the same stuff. But what else is out there? What else have you seen in the space that either you are using or would like to use?
In terms of vetting talent before we hire them, or like
both, either that or the actual ramp, getting them ramped up.
Yeah. So I'll give a couple examples, and you want more specific around AI, like kind of how to ramp people up, or just any sort of...
Yeah, either one.
Okay. I'll keep it with calls first, because I think this is a good example. For new hires, one of the things I'm starting to do a lot more is we build what's called a command center, which is like it is a doc with your talk tracks, objection handling, case studies, qualification, closing, all the things you need for a call. It's in one doc. And we teach you on how to be able to execute on each part of this. And throughout onboarding, you'll listen to what good looks like. You'll learn the skill, and then you'll go practice it in Hyperbound. And so the 2 ways we use tools to be able to help them ramp up faster on calls is, one, with Gong, they're listening to their teammates' calls in certain buckets. Gong even has the ability now to where you can has an Ask AI function on the call search, where if I'm listening to our top performer and I say, how does Brendan handle when someone says, send me an email? and write a talk track for me. They could literally analyze what good looks like and have AI create it for them, and they can take that and put that in, and like put it into their command center. Like, when I first started, you had to sit next to your best rep and just listen to them and write it down. Now it's like you can listen to it, have AI build you scripts for you, and then you can go practice it with Hyperbound in a realistic scenario. And so now what we're getting a rhythm of it is getting reps to practice really early. So day 4, they're already on Hyperbound practicing parts of the script. And we're teaching reps right now on how to be able to both find the areas they're struggling with, and then 2, use Hyperbound and Gong to be able to help identify what should they practice and do next time to be successful. And so we're very call heavy, so we really invested on those 2 areas, like detect what's that area you need to work on, and then this is what you should say next time and go practice it. So that would be probably one. Outside of that, like we're using tools like Gemini and Notebook LM to help them upskill and learn things faster. And so like even with Gemini now, if I want a case study on a particular situation, pain, or like industry, I could like pull it up, one of our Notebook LM notebooks of all our case studies, and in Gemini you can chat it and it can pull up a summary of what to say on a call, or the best customers that we reach out to, what's our best ICP. And so we use tools like that to help them both support them while they're on calls for questions that they might have or not know the answer to, and then also for their own knowledge, is as you're upskilling your knowledge on your company acumen and your personas, you can use those tools to help you learn those faster.
What really stands out to me on some of the things you're describing here is the amount of support and attention that goes into getting these reps up to speed. In most cases, a lot of companies are smaller. There's a lot more startups out there than JumpCloud, which I think has over 1,000 employees. So you guys really are dedicated, but a lot of SDRs jump into roles and they don't have the support. They don't have the tools. And so they're thrown into figure it out on their own, which is challenging. And so I think it's important that the more you invest in the SDRs in getting them up to speed and upskilling them, the better off they're going to do.
I think that's so true. I help consult helping reps ramp faster through Outbound OS, and that's one thing that we see a lot is we'll talk to people even at large companies, like some of the fastest growing startups, that even with teams, they've grown so large that they don't get any coaching or they don't know what good looks like. And so one, you're right, with like small startups, you should expect that if you're new to the role, you're going to have to figure out what good looks like, and they're not always going to have the support like an enablement team or multiple coaches to help coach you to be successful. You may have to go figure it out. But even at larger orgs, you'll grow so fast that you'll lose that coaching for those reps. And so it's really important to make sure that you've dedicated coaching for them to be successful, because especially with remote work, if you're not in person listening to somebody and getting like direct coaching from somebody in person, remote work almost requires enablement, because you need to make sure that people are supported remotely and having that coaching and just encouragement while they're going through cold calls.
It's a good point. I've found, while I love remote work, I've been working remote since 2015. I do think, sometimes I struggle to say this, I do think being in office, the team would be more productive, just because you're next to each other. But in this world, you've got people from all corners, either of the United States, of different parts of the world, and there's tons of benefits to being able to work remote. So it's a bit of a trade-off, but and I honestly wouldn't want to go into the office every day, but I do realize the productivity would probably be up.
I think that especially for outbound, I agree that's probably true. Of like if you're next to somebody, you'll learn a lot faster. And I don't think that's the argument usually of which one's more productive. Sometimes I think we would almost agree if you set 2 teams. A lot of the times you just have that energy, you have that coaching, you're learning through osmosis right there. But I agree that I think there is that if you have like a hybrid, I think that helps a lot too, where you kind of just break away, do some deep work. So I'm a big proponent of remote work because I can spend more time with my family. I was able to move to wherever I wanted. I do love remote work, but for an SDR role, if you're new, I tell every single new rep, I recommend starting in person, learning the ropes first, and learning that discipline on how to be able to be a good business operator. And then you can go remote for the right company that's going to support you remotely.
Yeah, that's good advice. Very good. Well, Troy, thank you for coming on. I really appreciate it. If people want to learn more about you, your role, some of the support you're doing with SDRs, where can they find you?
LinkedIn's the best way. Always happy to talk shop. If you're looking to break into tech sales, if you support SDR teams, or if you're an SDR, we just want to talk about the role, I'm always happy to speak.
All right. Until next time. Thank you.
Thanks so much, John.